Joe is a senior writer for Gordon and a prolific author, has worked in many, many different fields, and we're pleased to have her here to lead the group. So Joe, let's give a welcome to the panel, and I'll let you introduce them. Joe. Yeah.
We are excited about this conversation, and it's interesting that we're doing it after having heard about awards, because we know that in order to accomplish certain awards and honors, there are usually challenges that we face in order to do that. And so we have facilitated a couple of discussions about women in particular roles, and specifically we're calling them the Women in ... talks. So women in ministry and theology. We had that conversation in September with Sharon Ketchum and Elaine Phillips and Lori Truschel. Rebecca Lindsay, Michael Lindsay, our president's wife, led a really great discussion over homecoming with alumni and alumni women in particular roles and careers. And this morning we're really excited to talk about women in business and finance. In the spring, we hope to continue our series by having a discussion on women in the arts and then women in sciences. But this morning, we're going to just open it up. I'm going to introduce to you our panelists, and we're just hoping that the WIT Convocation series really give us opportunities to have campus-wide discussions, to give all of us permission to talk about what challenges are out there for women in particular fields, and what opportunities women have. So I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense to you guys? All right, good. Okay, so to my right is Casey Cooper. She's the managing director of the Center for Nonprofit Studies. She's a Gordon grad. She is probably if we gave awards for athletic supporters on campus for all of the teams, Casey probably would be, I think she's at every game screaming on the sidelines. I know, because I've been there with her on some of those. So she's a huge sports fan. She's also, she loves cooking, dancing, and isn't really pursuing a career in singing in the shower, but I was told that's, anyway, I digress. So she has taught accounting courses here and has spent time in the corporate world as an accountant, returned to Gordon after a career in accounting, and now leads the Nonprofit Studies Center. So she says the highlight of her career so far is watching Nonprofit Studies 12 graduate with distinction this last May, which is keeping with our honors convocation. Next to Casey is Alice Sang. She's new to Gordon. She comes from the finance world, and particularly Fidelity, where she worked, I don't even know, how long did you work with them? Over 15 years. So she really does come with a lot of experience and in the corporate world of finance. She is now an associate professor of economics and business, and apparently quite the talented musician herself, especially when her dog is around. Apparently, she gets her dog to stand up and sing and dance. That's a discussion for later, I guess. So that was a joke. So you can laugh at that if you want to. Good. All right. Okay, you're with me here this morning. Okay. And then next to Alice is Pam Lazarakis, who is the Director of Career Services. She also is a Gordon alum, and she has spent most of her career at Gordon in various departments, but is interacting a lot with women in the business world and in nonprofits as well as for-profit corporations, especially in inviting a lot of folks to campus to work with our students through career services. One thing we might not know about Pam, which I didn't know about, is that she is an identical twin. There you go. Do you guys sing too? Because these two sing. You do? Okay, so we've got a singing theme happening here. So as we begin our discussion, I've given them questions that I wanted to really throw out that I hope are kind of questions that you're thinking about as well. As you think about career and calling and the different opportunities and yet challenges that face women in particular these days. I wanted to just throw the first question out to each of you, and I think we'll start with you, Casey, but just talk a little bit about how you first sensed God's call on your life as you went into accounting in particular, and then for Alice, for finance and career coaching.
Well, I started off like most little girls growing up wanting to be a goalie for the NHL. But being a girl really got in the way of that, so I moved on. And I got a job in high school at a bank, and by the end of my senior year, I was working in the accounting department and discovered as a high school senior that I love accounting. For those of you who have been in my principal's accounting course, you'll nod and go, yep, a little too much some days, sure. But it's something that I really love. And so all at Gordon, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I was focused on that, went off to be an auditor, really enjoyed that. And all of a sudden got a call from Gordon saying, hey, do you want to teach a class here? And I was like, no. I was completely afraid to talk in front of people, never wanted to do that. I'm okay today. If my knees start shaking, it's because my feet don't actually touch the ground, so it's not a scared issue. But I just was deathly afraid of speaking in front of people. But I said, you know, I love Gordon. When am I ever going to get this chance again? If I say no now, would they ever ask me again? So I said yes. I came back and hated it. I had 4 students in my first class, and they just stared at me. And in chapel, that's okay. You guys are doing okay. But in class, that didn't work out well for me. And so I almost called in sick one day. And for a once-a-week class, 3 hours a night, you can't call in sick. That's silly. So I went anyways, and the kids started to turn around, they started to ask questions, and I also found I really loved it. And so going from an area that I was completely deathly afraid of, never wanted to speak in front of people ever, to being a professor, I can't say it's anything but God in my life. So God's call on your life came literally through a phone call as well. But it wasn't an easy thing to walk into. No, and had it not takeaway. Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. Alice?
Well, actually, I think there are 2 phases in my career. So before the phase 1, at that time, I was not a Christian. So I really can't honestly say that I knew that was God's call for me to do something. But of course, looking back, I think God was preparing me for that. And some of the students in my class already heard this. I was afraid of math like the plague, and I didn't do well at all. I dropped math when I was in my 8th grade, and did not want to work with numbers because they just intimidated me. It was not until later on that I started teaching English and prepared myself to continue to teach English. Not that I was that good as an English teacher, as you can tell by my accent. But anyway, so there was some change in circumstance that made me realize that I need to pursue a business career in order to do well in the U.S. So in fact, I went back to study in a community college and learn algebra, business math, accounting, and so on. And I found that I actually could like those subjects. I was doing very well because I put a lot of efforts into it. I mean, you can imagine being Chinese, so learning everything in English, and then of course, all the disciplines are very technical. So you just have to put in a lot of effort. And that's what led me into NYU, and I graduated in their business school, majoring in finance. And of course, then I was solidly on a path to pursue a finance career. So I would call that God's preparation for me to get into finance. And he also opened a lot of doors for me over the years, so that I was able to work in the top Wall Street firms for maybe about 10 years or so before I joined Fidelity. And of course, the second phase of my career involves teaching here. That really came when I was asked by Larry Locke, a former Fidelity colleague of mine, who was teaching at the ECB at the time. And he came, he asked me to be a guest speaker in one of his classes. So I came in to share with him after I retired from Fidelity, thinking that, okay, maybe I will start my own business or something. But I enjoyed looking at the beautiful campus. It was March, okay, so all the snow pretty much, were gone, and I saw like daffodils poking out. And I was thinking, wow, what a wonderful thing it would be if I could teach here. But of course, that didn't come until later on when they started to, I got an email from Dr. Smith, Stephen Smith, inviting me to apply to teach as an adjunct professor. Like Casey, it was a struggle. Some of the students here who took my first financial management class probably could share with you. I was disorganized, compared to other professors, and I was a little bit intimidated. But over time, I think I start to know what I needed to do, not so much in spending more time in preparation of the course material, but to understand better how my students are thinking, put myself in their shoes, and learn how they study, and see if I can help them to get the material. And also, hopefully, to instill a purpose in their study. This is something that we can talk later on. So that's, I really think this is God's calling for me to be here at this stage of my life. So I value the time a lot, and I don't want to waste 1 minute of it.
That's great. Yeah.
My sense of calling began actually with God's original call, which occurred for me as a senior in high school. I was not raised in the church. My family came into the church midway through my teenage years, and a newly graduated Gordon Conwell youth pastor came to our local church, reached out to my parents, who in turn said, wouldn't it be a good thing if you went to the new youth group? And I went, and within the fall, I was presented with a question. If you are coming to this church and you are reading scripture and you are praying regularly, have you committed your life to Christ? And I'm very thankful for a youth pastor who put it really right in front of me. The faith is about making a decision and sticking with that decision. And that occurred for me as a senior in high school. I decided that yes, this all made sense, more or less. As a new Christian, there were a lot of questions that I continued to have. But I struck out as a Christian with that being a goal, the goal for my life, and trying to strive for faithfulness in following that original promise. As I approached my college, of course, being in senior year, I was in the middle of my college search, and I felt that my faith was new, it was pretty shaky, and wouldn't it be a good idea to go to the only Christian college that I was aware of, which was Gordon College. And that's what led me here, ultimately. I studied biblical studies and secondary education in social studies. And the question that predominated the conversations in my senior year within my family, to my sister, my twin, and I, who was also progressing through her college years, was, how are you going to support yourself? My parents asked that often and regularly, and I did not have a clear plan. When I graduated, which was in 1981, Joe asked us to be revealing of our experiences, and I hate to tell you what year it was because it implies how long I've been out of college, but 1981 and the years from 1980 to 82 were the second worst recession to what we are in now. Am I right? Yes. Thank you. I returned to my home, and I did exactly what I see a number of our graduates do. I resumed a summer job. I had a wonderful summer job in the tourism trade. I went right back to that summer job and began to work. Now, more than 30 years later, I have worked full-time throughout my career. And I'm thankful that I had a summer job to go back to, which, because of connections through it, led to my first year, which was in a bank, which led on to my second and third years out of Gordon, which were as a customer service representative. And that job ultimately was what I was doing when I got a postcard in the mail that said, we're looking for applicants for an admissions counselor. I don't think Gordon sends postcards about openings that we have anymore, but I was glad, and I interviewed and began a 14-year career in the admissions office. I have loved working with students, first prospective students, and now current students at points of decision in their lives. And of course, coming to college is an enormous decision, many choices, many factors in that decision. And I was privileged to walk with hundreds of students in 14 years in admissions through their decision process. I began to really long to work with current students, though, and I think that for me was the motivation to try to seek another role on campus where I would have the opportunity to work with their professional development, and so had a conversation now many years ago with my current supervisor, Dean of Student Life, Barry Loy, and began to use all of my persuasive skills as to why I could make this jump from one department in higher ed to another. And I'm very grateful that he agreed with me and gave me a chance to become Director of Career Services. I think calling to me has always been about doing what God puts right in front of you and seeing where it leads, and being faithful in your role, working as hard as you can, gaining as much as you can from that role, and seeing what's next.
Well, and I'm really glad that you all talked a little bit about your journeys, because I talk to students a lot who think that you have to make the choice right now, today, while you're at Gordon, about what vocation you should be pursuing. And I think all four of us can pretty much testify that our lives change, that life is often not what we expect it will be, and that the goal is not necessarily to continue to find the next great career, but to be faithful in the gifts that God has given us, like each of you has said so far. But that said, we know it also isn't easy, and that there's a challenge in a lot of careers. And so because you have all three been business leaders, I wondered if you could really quickly talk about maybe some of the challenges you've faced as women in the business world. And it doesn't have to be, or women you know who have experienced different challenges that for whatever reason. And then we'll go on to some other questions too about maybe some advice that you could give us, and in helping us think better about how we can support Christians in the marketplace as well. But Alice, how about if we start with you, because of your experience in corporate America? What kind of challenges did you experience as a woman, or did you see other women face?
Okay, well, as you recall, I just told you my journey getting prepared into the financial world. So it shouldn't be surprising to you that when I got hired by E.F. Hutton, that was at the time one of the top or the most profitable brokerage firm in the United States. There was a lot of self-doubt. I wonder whether I could do it. And in that day, actually around the time when we had the worst recession, I was thrilled to get hired to be a municipal bond analyst there. And the pay was good, but not exorbitant, I don't think. I was really wondering whether I would be able to publish reports every week, which are read by institutional clients, our traders, and portfolio managers. So you're talking about the Fidelity managers of the world, the Vanguard managers of the world, reading my reports to decide on making investment decisions. So the self-doubt was there. And I think there was also some skepticism among my colleagues, because I was kind of brand new. I didn't have experience. I didn't speak English as well as I did today. So it's horrifying when a client called. I couldn't use gestures and body language to support what I wanted to tell them. And I was afraid that they would not understand my accent. So those were obstacles in the beginning. And then, of course, over time, God had helped me overcome them. And I can't tell you enough how lonely it feels. It was not very common to see women in finance in those days, okay? In fact, when I was at E.F. Hutton, there was a New York Times Magazine article about an investment banker at E.F. Hutton. She was featured. And the title was Against All Odds, to kind of portray how she had been successful in a male-dominated world. Now, in finance, on Wall Street, it's still quite true. I can share with you some of the things later on. But I don't think we need to worry about too much of the glass ceiling either. Because if you are afraid of the glass ceiling and you don't get into the field, then what's the point of all these worries? Like, get your foot in the door first and prove yourself. Just now, I heard something about, okay, God doesn't call us to success, but to be faithful. I have a little bit a different take on it. No, you can be successful. And in fact, in order to honor God, we need to be successful in whatever God calls us to do. But also, remember, success takes many different forms. It does not always come with a lot of money. It does not always come with a lot of influence. You may not get fancy titles. But if you do what God calls you to do very well and make a positive impact on those you serve, that is success. So consider that and keep that in mind.
Pam, challenges that you've faced or have seen for women?
The challenge that I think of most in my particular career, and I'm glad to say that I see a change, both here on campus as well as in other organizations, has been finding women role models to see how do they manage their lives, how do they grow as a Christian, how do they manage their home and family, how do they advance in their careers. I was very fortunate in my mid-20s to have a supervisor who invested a great deal in me. Finding a mentor, and I know that's advice that a lot of people give, go out, find a mentor. I would say that we need to be open to that. It's very hard to make that happen until someone comes alongside of you, and for mysterious reasons, I still do not know to this day why my mentor picked me out of a lot of employees that he could have picked to invest time, energy, conversations, working through both professional challenges and the personal challenges that accompany the life of every professional, and I had that. I must say, though, that there were times when I looked across the landscape and wanted to find someone who was a woman. And I did not find that. I was fortunate to have many women of influence in my lives, including my mother, who was a professional, including a number of people who eventually reported to me, who have a great impact on who I am, not only as a person, but as a supervisor. And so it's not always someone who you report to, but maybe someone who reports to you who will be a great influence in your life. And I have that still to this very day. My good colleagues are sitting down front, encouraging me in this very moment. I think also in terms of looking for mentors, they can be through professional associations. I encourage everyone to connect broadly and widely and build relationships with professionals of all different kinds.
What about you?
Mine, more so at the accounting firm that I worked at than at Gordon, but it's been the woman who came before me has been my actually biggest obstacle. Alice mentioned the glass ceiling, and I would agree that it doesn't exist anymore. I always felt that I showed up and I could see the framework of what was a glass ceiling, but it was broken and people had gone through it. But the woman who had done that had sacrificed a lot to do that, either not having children, not getting married, or not spending as much time as they wanted to with that family also. And they expected me to follow exactly the same path that they did. And so coming in and saying, you know what, no, I do want both a career and a family, but I understand that means I can't work 80 hours a week. And that was my biggest obstacle of dealing with the expectations of, if I had to sacrifice to get here, so do you.
Right, right. So the challenges are still there, obviously, even though the glass ceiling has been shattered or broken or at least poked. The challenges are there, but they look differently to each person and in each career. I mean, I would think so, in each calling. So, so has there been, well, you talked about a little bit about role models and mentors, but how about, what are some things that you could give us, young women or men, going into business as a Christian in this day and age, given how cutthroat it can be? Or what kind of advice could you give us, those who are not going into business, but who want to support our friends and colleagues who are Christians in the marketplace? I mean, and we have about 5 minutes left, so what could be some things that we could take with us to really know that we're in for some challenges, but we can make some great contributions? Casey, you want to start? And we'll...
Yeah, I think one of my biggest struggles at Gordon was not wanting to go into ministry and recognizing that business is probably the place where I've met the most non-Christians ever in my life. And so I'd ask you to think of it that way and to support your friends who are going into business, to recognize that they're not picking a lesser career because they don't want to be a pastor, or they don't want to somehow do something that's more obviously mission work. But I talked about my faith more with my colleagues in an accounting firm than I ever imagined that I thought I would. And so that's...
Yeah, so in other words, you're saying business could be a ministry.
Yes.
Or we should be thinking of it that way and not just going to the mission field, traditional mission field. Right.
Yeah, and I think that your classmates, or you need support for that. One of the things that I think college students do a little bit too much is just spend time with just college students, and I would encourage you to broaden your expectations about who you want to be in community with. If you graduate and you only hang out with people who just graduated college, well then what's your understanding about where you should go and how you should get there? You're all in the same kind of lost boat yourselves, and so branch out a bit.
Good. Alice?
I would strongly encourage my students, as well as everyone in the Christian community, to take a different look at business. The rich has been maligned, but I would say, be sure we live here for God's purpose. That's first and foremost what should be in your mind. God may want you to be a provider of resources to his kingdom. If you have the talent to be successful in finance, you can make a lot of money. But a lot of money, that compensation, you should just divide it into some parts, a small part for yourself. So stick with a simple life and think of accumulating resources for the use of God's kingdom. I mean, I'm not trying to brag about it, but I do want you to think it's really satisfying and wonderful to think that at some point in your career, you're not working for your own, for your family anymore, but you're working for God's kingdom, because in your nest egg, there is a very large portion that you are accumulating to support those people who need your help in God's kingdom. So think that way, okay? A lot of people get too caught up by just looking at themselves. I've got enough, that's it, and then I live commensurate with my lifestyle, should be commensurate with what I make. So they end up being Christians, I would think that in name only, because they may not be as generous as they can be in giving to God's kingdom. Okay, so keep that in mind. And another thing is, you don't know how privileged you are to be studying in an institution like Gordon College. If you are not yet maximizing the use of all the resources provided to you by the school, then you're shortchanging yourself. God has a place to equip his people to make you competitive in the global economy. Let me scare you some, okay? The BRIC countries, Brazil, China, India, and Russia, they have 1.5 billion people in the workforce. The US workforce is 154.9 million. What you don't do, those 1.5 billion people do, where are you in the global economy? Okay? So think that way. Being God's people, he has all the resources, all the dedicated professors to help you, to equip yourself to become relevant in the world. And that's how we can do well and be successful and become salt and light. So before you can change the world for the better, change yourself first. Pam?
I think a couple of things that I would love to see available and for students to take advantage of these opportunities. Going into a business environment at any level in any industry, I would recommend that students talk to professionals within that industry to understand it from an insider's perspective. I would also recommend an ethics course. I think there are many places where Christians do things differently and their values different from the common values of our culture. And I think in taking ethics courses, there are often models about how do we manage the rub of having different values from many other people around us who are making very different choices. I think some people in the workplace really struggle with feeling that they are a lone voice because of their faith and the way that they want to operate in their workplace. I think ethics courses are at least a starting place for us to sort that out and to develop a model where we persist and to see our values through, because at the end of the day, I think what satisfies people in work most is they feel that they have contributed in a Christian way to the workplace that they're at.
Right. Well, thank you all. We invite you to continue these kind of conversations. The whole point of these WIT conversations is to invite ongoing discussion about the issues raised today, and we encourage you also to talk to some of our women experts on campus, if you will, and to pick their brains. So let the conversation continue. Thank you. You're dismissed.